Death Stranding 2 was recently shown off a little bit, or I should say teased, and it is looking a lot, and I mean a lot, like a Metal Gear Solid game, at least in inspiration of character design, different characters and actors being used. And there's a lot here to talk about today, but I've seen a lot of people on the internet, especially joking around on Reddit and Twitter, calling this essentially Metal Gear Solid 6 or a secret Metal Gear game. And in some ways they might be right, because Hideo Kojima does have a very, very long history with his video games of referencing past titles, using ideas from past titles, different types of character designs, in the same way that George Lucas always wanted his works to rhyme with each other. I would argue that that is one of Hideo Kojima's strengths, but also a weakness if you didn't like previous works. If you're not a big fan of the long-ass staircase run in Metal Gear Solid, well, it was in previous games like Metal Gear 2 as well. He does a lot of reusing concepts and a lot of modernizing concepts, or taking things he wasn't able to do in the past, no matter what series it was, and adapting them or turning them into elements of the new thing he's doing. Very big pass to that. So today we're going to take a look at that. I did have a question of the day for you, which is, what do you think so far about Death Stranding? I know that the original game, it is praised, but it was also a little bit contentious. A lot of people didn't like it. They found the gameplay more slow, more experimental. So I'm interested to hear that. Like, what is your thoughts on this universe? What are your thoughts on this new teaser? And as a Metal Gear fan, maybe you have or have not played this series, would you play it? I'm interested to hear those in the comments down below. Also, really quick, I do have an Amazon affiliate link, a list of Metal Gear stuff for people who love Kojima's products or the Metal Gear products or things that are similar to them from Konami and other places. That's in the description down below and pinned comment. I do make a small commission on that. We also have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop, that I'll talk about at the end of the video, where we make some really fun stuff. Now, first off, I want to say that there is nothing wrong with being inspired by other works, and I would take this to a pretty big extreme. If you're just ripping something off and slapping a label on it, that's one thing, but especially when it's a work that you had a hand in, nothing wrong with this. And actually, in fact, even going further than that, there are a lot of works that have been inspired by other ones that we wouldn't have huge, popular, massive things if this wasn't allowed. There's always this jumpiness of copying. I don't think Death Stranding is copying Metal Gear Solid. Even if it was, Kojima's exit from that company is, again, the word contentious comes up when speaking about this, because it becomes an issue of people arguing about it. There's people who argue, well, you know, Kojima wasn't the sole author, there were co-directors, there were other writers, there were all these people on the series, his importance is overstated. There are people who say his importance is understated, and that the Metal Gear series can't exist without him. There are people who say, well, he left the company because he was spending too much money on MGS5 and it went way over budget, it was taking too long, so that's fair. There are people who say, well, now hold on, the way you did it was you forced him out and allegedly treated him pretty poorly that last 2 years, and then blocked him from going to the Game Awards. So do you see what I'm saying? I mention this whenever we talk about Kojima, because it becomes like a clusterfuck of arguments about almost the deity of Hideo Kojima and how holy he is or how awful he is. Kojima is a man who created and helped create some very cool stuff. And we can see his inspirations shining through in Metal Gear as well, from things like Police Knots all the way to other projects that he worked on in the past, even things like Metal Gear to Metal Gear Solid, reusing some of these ideas. That's why I don't think that this is a problem. It's why I think it is cool that we actually see these inspirations from Solid Snake, like very clear references to a snake-like character, all the way to essentially a Metal Gear Rex looking mech in this trailer. Now, am I going to pretend here talking to you that I am the master of lore and knowledge on Death Stranding? No, I am far more interested in the Metal Gear universe than the Death Stranding universe. That's just point blank honesty. But I do think it's really cool to see this, and it's making me kind of want to pick up Death Stranding and actually play it myself instead of just watching someone play it, because that's a lot of my experience with Death Stranding, was watching a lot of the game. This actually makes me want to get into this universe because it's really cool to see Kojima referencing these past works. It's interesting because even with this character who looks a lot like Solid Snake, who puts on a bandana and everything in the trailer. This is a character named Neil, and we don't know everything about any of these characters yet, but he's actually being played by an Italian actor, and being the king of pronouncing things wrong, I will do so now, Luca Marinelli, you can tell me if I said that wrong in the comments, who Kojima had actually previously said was a spitting image of Snake back in 2020. So this man was cast for a reason, right? I think we can all agree on that. This man was cast for a reason. Kojima went out of his way. And with Kojima Productions, I would argue that the man has more control than ever before when it comes to his games. You know, Sony looked at this guy and they kind of wrote him a blank check. They kind of said, hey, whatever experimental, crazy stuff you want to do, whatever kind of game you want to make, we put a Hideo Kojima game on there, we put a Kojima Productions game on there. You have a cult of personality behind you, for better or worse. You know, I think there are some people who aren't willing to accept any critiques or criticisms of anything he's worked on. That's the side I think it's worse for, where it's almost like a worshiping him thing. But I also think a lot of people understate his importance, especially for a face from Eastern games to the West. Kojima did an amazing, an incredible job at relating to people in interviews, at showing off his passion for storytelling, at giving interviews, even in Japan, even written articles, all the way back to Metal Gear 2. He was great as a face for gaming, and he was a very, and is a very talented person who, you know, does drive the games industry, I would say, in many ways forward, whether you agree with some of his choices or not. That's kind of irrelevant. He is a very important figure. So to see him going back to the well with Death Stranding 2, it does make me wonder what kind of gameplay changes there will be. The original game does actually have stealth, but I wouldn't argue that it's some kind of stealth simulator on the level of any Metal Gear Solid. The stealth is a little more surface level. It's more like just kind of avoiding enemies, kind of getting by them, especially when your resources are not prevalent near the beginning of the game, and trying to move through that world, make these deliveries, interact with the story in a way where you're not just going to get, honestly, just kind of destroyed because you are not a super soldier. So in that way, it already does have some stealth gameplay. But when you're showing a more militaristic look at Death Stranding 2, you're showing essentially a mech that dons the head of what looks like Metal Gear Rex, but reworked. You're showing a character like Snake. You're showing all of these things that evoke the past, that evoke, it's probably overused now, the idea of like the game or the movie is a celebration of the work of blah, blah, blah. This trailer looks like a celebration of the past work of Hideo Kojima. It's got weird ass elements of Metal Gear Solid. It's got weird elements of something like PT, where there's like some horrifying things in this trailer. And I would argue that the Death Stranding world does a good job of that in general, going from subdued and normal in some places to downright terrifying and larger than life in others. There are characters in this trailer that remind me even of someone like Vamp. So I think that overall, like, if people are going into this not as a meme, actually expecting this to somehow tie into MGS or something like that, you'd be hugely disappointed. He cannot do that without Konami's permission, whether you like them or not, because as he stated before, Metal Gear Solid is not, and it never was, his. Like, he didn't own it. It was a Konami property that he worked on, helped popularize, and did help make what it was, absolutely, but it wasn't a Kojima property. It wasn't something he owned that he could just whip out, I guess, pen and pad, write up a story, throw it out there, and turn it into an official thing. You have to go through the licensing channels for that. So I do believe that this game, for what it is going to do a lot of references, it's going to do a lot of callbacks. It looks like, you know, even picking up an actor that you wanted to see as Snake, putting a bandana on his head and making him fulfill a military role of some kind. I'm not saying he's going to be Solid Snake, but you're very clearly going for that imagery on purpose, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a cheap gimmick to me. It's not exploitive. It's not a ripoff of his own games or anything like that. This is just a celebration in a lot of ways of what came before, and it does make me interested for what's going to happen going forward. And it also makes me kind of wonder if this does very well, you know, especially if it incorporates maybe some more MGS type elements. And I know that his newer game is going even more in that direction of like tactical espionage. It does make me wonder if a game like this does well, that's evoking that imagery, and maybe the next game that he makes that is going more in the Metal Gear direction of gameplay, what is going to happen to the future of Metal Gear Solid? That's what makes me wonder, you know, because it's always going to be measured by the Kojima era, which was basically 1 through 5 in a lot of ways. And there's some side stuff there like Peace Walker, etc. There's also stuff that he had very little or no involvement with, or almost no involvement with in there. Some of it was good, some of it was very not. But that said, it does make me wonder what will happen with that brand going forward. You know, I think if Kojima puts out this game and it's met with the reception that Death Stranding 1 was, where it had very strong sales, but a lot of the sentiment was, I bought it to support Kojima and it was too slow for me. Or if his next stealth game comes out and it's like, oh, this feels like Metal Gear Solid, but not as good. I almost feel like that, in a way, is going to make it easier for Metal Gear to continue. But then you also ask, well, should Metal Gear continue? And then we get into this entire debate as well that always comes up without Kojima. Should Metal Gear continue? I guess overall, I think it's really cool to see this. I think it's awesome. I like when creators are not afraid of their past. I like when creators celebrate their work and they are proud of it. And that, to me, is what this trailer comes across as. So I want to know what it comes across as to you. What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the future of this franchise, the Metal Gear franchise, Kojima's future games, all of that stuff? It's an interesting discussion, as Konami has been in a bit of a renaissance, in a way, bringing back Silent Hill, you know, bringing back Metal Gear. They recently did Suikoden, which I believe I was making a video on JayRPG, which may or may not be up at this point. We'll see. But a lot of stuff coming from Konami and a lot of stuff coming from Kojima. It's almost like watching your parents who are divorced fight over their kids in a way. If you enjoyed today's video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate it very, very much. Answering the question of the day helps us out a lot. I did want to say we have our own store, cosmobunny.shop. Discount code DJAY123. By the way, that's also our Fortnite code, DJAY123. On Cosmo Bunny Shop, though, we sell coasters, keychains, trays, and more. Speaking of not being afraid of the past, speaking of repurposing an idea and turning it into something new, the same way Kojima has done over and over again, it's something that we try to do on cosmobunny.shop. What we do is we take comic books, manga, magazines, pamphlets, your grandma's newspaper that she used to beat the dog with. I don't know. That was dark. Where'd that come from? Why'd you bring that up? You're weird. We take these things, we repurpose them into these coasters, keychains, trays, and more, because a lot of them end up in landfills. A lot of them actually never end up in the recycling. They never get melted down and reused or anything like that. They just end up getting buried or tossed in the ocean, these papers. It sucks, but it's the truth. So we take those things, we recycle them into a resin piece that can last in your home for many, many years to come. Please take care of it though. Don't like frisbee it or anything. I can't guarantee its safety or yours with that. And we recycle the rest and make sure it actually ends up not in the ocean. Also, I did want to say that we have our own Amazon affiliate link. I mentioned it earlier, I showed a little bit, but right here is our storefront, and we also have lists of things like even inspired by Metal Gear, where if you enjoy these things, you buy it from our link, we make a small commission, it helps us out a lot, and we appreciate you. Have a fantastic day, and as always everyone, stay shui.